The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Emilio's fine dining, casting long rectangles of light across the polished wooden floors. The restaurant wouldn't open for hours, but Lily was already there, tying her apron with practiced movements. At 28, she had been working as a waitress at Emilio's for nearly 3 years, long enough to know every crack in the marble countertops and every squeak in the kitchen door. "Morning, Lily," called Miguel, the head chef, as he pushed through the swinging doors with a crate of fresh vegetables. "Ready for another exciting Tuesday?" Lily smiled and nodded, though they both knew Tuesdays were the slowest nights of the week. That's why she liked them. Less chaos, fewer mistakes, smaller chance of getting yelled at by impatient customers who didn't understand that she couldn't make the kitchen cook faster. "Coffee's fresh," she replied, pointing to the pot she'd already brewed. It was their morning ritual. She made coffee, he pretended Tuesday would be exciting, and together they prepared for another day of serving overpriced pasta to people who could afford to spend more on one meal than Lily made in a day. Emilio's wasn't just any restaurant. It was the kind of place where local politicians held meetings, where couples got engaged, where the tablecloths were changed twice a day even if they weren't dirty. And at the center of the main dining room stood its crown jewel, a gleaming black grand piano. The piano wasn't just for show. Every evening from 6:30 to 10, someone played while guests dined. Usually it was Anthony, a retired music teacher with nimble fingers and a repertoire that ranged from gentle classical pieces to soft jazz standards. The music was as much a part of Emilio's as the imported olive oil or the hand-painted ceiling mural. Lily ran a cloth over table 14, her favorite section near the windows overlooking the small garden. She could almost set up the tables with her eyes closed. Fork on the left, knife and spoon on the right, water glass at 2 o'clock, wine glass at 1. The routine was soothing, predictable. "Unlike her life outside these walls. Hey, did you hear?" Zoe, another waitress, rushed in through the front door, 20 minutes late as usual. Her curly hair was flying in all directions and she hadn't even put on her uniform yet. "Anthony's sick. Food poisoning or something?" Lily frowned. "Is he okay?" Yeah, he'll live. But he's definitely not coming in tonight." Zoe disappeared into the break room to change, her voice trailing behind her. "Boss is freaking out trying to find someone to play." The manager, Hal, was indeed freaking out. Lily could hear him in his office, his voice rising with each phone call. "What do you mean you can't?" "It's just for one night. Yes, I understand you have other commitments, but this is an emergency." By lunchtime, Hal's face had taken on the color of the beet salad special. The lunch service went smoothly enough, no piano music needed during the day, but everyone could feel the tension building as the clock ticked toward evening. "What happens if nobody shows up to play?" Lily asked Teresa, the senior waitress who had been at Emilio's since before it was called Emilio's. Teresa shrugged, adjusting her reading glasses to review the dinner reservations. "Last time this happened, about 5 years ago, the boss played some classical CD. The customers complained about the ambiance being compromised, whatever that means. 3 parties left without ordering dessert." She lowered her voice. Mr. Vescovi was furious. Someone got fired. Mr. Vescovi was the owner, a man Lily had seen perhaps 4 times in 3 years. He was rarely there, but his presence was always felt. His standards were impossibly high, his disappointment legendary. Lily glanced at the piano as she set out fresh bread baskets. Sunlight caught the polished surface, making it gleam like black water. She remembered the first time she'd seen it, during her job interview. She'd almost reached out to touch it then, but had pulled her hand back at the last second. Some things weren't meant for people like her to touch. The afternoon passed in a blur of preparation. Fresh flowers were arranged, wine was uncorked to breathe, specials were memorized. Hal emerged from his office looking defeated, his tie loosened and hair standing up where he'd run his hands through it repeatedly. "No luck?" Teresa asked, though the answer was obvious. "Everyone's booked. It's some charity concert night at the university." Hal checked his watch. "We'll have to use recorded music. Mr. Vescovi is coming tonight with some potential investors." He said this last part quietly, but everyone within earshot froze momentarily. Lily's stomach tightened. She knew what that meant. Extra scrutiny, extra pressure, extra chance for something to go wrong. She double-checked her tables, making sure every setting was perfect. At 5 o'clock, the kitchen was in full swing, preparing for dinner service. The smell of roasting garlic and simmering sauces filled the air. Waitstaff reviewed the wine list and daily specials one last time. Hal paced between the dining room and his office, checking his phone every few minutes as if a pianist might magically text him. Lily found herself staring at the piano again during a rare, quiet moment. Without thinking, she walked over to it, drawn by some force she didn't quite understand. The dining room was empty. No one was watching. She touched the edge of the piano lightly, then lifted the fallboard that covered the keys. The ivory and ebony keys looked up at her like old friends she hadn't seen in years. Her fingers hovered over them, not quite touching. It had been so long. So very long since, "What are you doing?" Lily jumped back, the fallboard closing with a soft thud. Hal stood there, eyebrows raised. "Sorry, I was just checking if it was dusty," she finished lamely. Hal sighed. "Well, since you're so concerned with the piano's condition, you can put out the 'Our pianist will return tomorrow' sign before we open." He handed her a small brass frame with an engraved message. "And make sure the sound system is working. We'll need to use the recorded playlist tonight." Lily took the sign, feeling its weight in her hands. She placed it carefully on the piano's closed lid, positioning it so diners would see it as they entered. The brass looked wrong against the black finish. Out of place. Like her. She tested the sound system as instructed, but the classical music that played through the speakers sounded hollow, lifeless. Nothing like the warm, breathing notes that usually filled the space when Anthony played. At 6 o'clock, the doors opened. The first guests arrived, a couple celebrating an anniversary, a group of business associates, two women who looked like sisters catching up over wine. Lily greeted them with her professional smile, escorted them to their tables, recited the specials with practiced enthusiasm. All the while, the recorded music played in the background, too quiet in some moments, too loud in others. By 6:15, half the tables were filled. Lily moved efficiently between them, taking orders, bringing drinks, answering questions about the menu. But she could feel it, the difference. The guests noticed too. Several asked about Anthony. The atmosphere wasn't right. Something was missing. At 6:25, Mr. Vescovi arrived with 4 men in expensive suits. Hal nearly tripped over himself rushing to greet them, apologizing immediately for the absence of live music. Mr. Vescovi's face darkened as he was led to the best table in the house, directly in view of the piano with its apologetic little sign. Lily watched from across the room as she served a table of 4 their appetizers. She saw Mr. Vescovi gesture toward the piano, saw Hal's nervous nodding, saw one of the suited men lean back in his chair with a look of disappointment. The restaurant was filling up now, the hum of conversation competing with the recorded symphony that nobody was really listening to. Teresa bumped Lily's elbow as they passed in the service corridor. "Mr. Vescovi's table is yours now," she whispered. "I've got too many. Don't mess up." Before Lily could protest, Teresa was gone, leaving her with the most important table of the night. Heart pounding, Lily approached Mr. Vescovi's table. "Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Lily, and I'll be your server tonight. May I start you with something to drink?" She took their orders flawlessly, recommended the perfect wine pairing, answered questions about preparation methods. She was good at her job, always had been. But as she turned to place their order with the kitchen, she heard one of the men say, "The ambiance isn't what you described, Emilio." "My apologies," Mr. Vescovi replied. "Our regular pianist is ill. This is unusual." Lily paused by the piano on her way back from the kitchen. The recorded music had switched to something with too much cello, drowning out conversation at nearby tables. A couple at table 7 was asking for the volume to be turned down. Another guest was complaining that it didn't match the elegant dining experience he'd been promised. She looked at the piano, at her hands, at Hal's increasingly frantic movements as he tried to adjust the volume on the sound system while simultaneously seating new guests, at Mr. Vescovi's tight expression as he attempted to impress his visitors. Lily took a deep breath, her heart hammering against her ribs. Before she could change her mind, she walked directly to Hal and tapped his shoulder. "I can play," she said quietly. Hal stared at Lily for a long moment, as if she had started speaking a foreign language. The chaos of the dining room swirled around them, servers balancing plates, the murmur of conversations, the awkward recorded music that kept jumping between volumes. "You can play?" Hal repeated, his voice flat with disbelief. Lily nodded, fighting the urge to look down at her shoes. "Yes, I can play the piano." "The piano," Hal said, gesturing toward the gleaming instrument that was currently being used as an expensive table for the brass "Our pianist will return tomorrow" sign. "That piano? Yes, how well?" The question hung between them. Lily could feel her confidence wavering. How well? Well enough to replace Anthony? Well enough to play in front of Mr. Vescovi and his important guests? Well enough not to embarrass herself and get fired? Well enough, she said simply. Hal ran a hand through his already disheveled hair, looking like a man choosing between drowning and burning. The recorded music hit a particularly jarring crescendo, causing several diners to wince. "Look," he said, lowering his voice. "I appreciate the offer, but this isn't karaoke night at the local bar. Our customers expect a certain quality." "Table 12 needs more bread," Teresa interrupted, rushing past with a tray of drinks. "And 7 is complaining about the music again." Hal closed his eyes briefly, as if praying for patience. When he opened them, he looked at Lily with renewed focus. "What can you play? And don't say chopsticks or heart and soul." "Bach, Beethoven, Chopin, Debussy," Lily listed quietly. "Some jazz standards, movie themes, popular classics." Hal's eyebrows inched upward with each name. "Where did you—" "Mr. Vescovi is asking to speak with you," another server called out, pointing toward the owner's table. Hal's face paled. He looked at the piano, at Lily, at Mr. Vescovi's increasingly impatient expression, and made a decision. 10 minutes, he said to Lily. "You have 10 minutes to prove you can do this. If it's not working, we go back to the recordings." "Deal?" Lily nodded, her throat suddenly dry. What had she done? After all these years of keeping this part of herself hidden, why had she spoken up now? "Go," Hal said, giving her a gentle push toward the piano. "I'll stall Mr. Vescovi." Lily walked to the piano on legs that felt disconnected from her body. Conversations paused as people noticed her. The waitress in the black uniform approaching the piano with purpose. She removed the brass sign, carefully setting it aside. She adjusted the bench, aware of the eyes following her movements. Her hands were trembling slightly as she lifted the fallboard again, revealing the keys she'd almost touched earlier. For a brief, terrible moment, she wondered if she'd forgotten everything. It had been so long. Years of not playing. Years of pretending that music hadn't once been the center of her world. She sat down, adjusted the bench again, though it didn't need it, and placed her fingers on the keys. The cool ivory felt both foreign and familiar beneath her fingertips. She took a deep breath and began to play. The first notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune floated into the air, replacing the canned music that Hal had finally managed to turn off. Lily started quietly, tentatively, feeling her way back into the piece like someone entering a dark room they once knew well. The restaurant didn't fall silent immediately. Conversations continued. Silverware clinked against plates, servers still moved between tables. But gradually, something in the atmosphere changed. By the end of the first page of music, Lily's hands had stopped shaking. The notes came more easily now, muscle memory awakening after its long sleep. She didn't need sheet music. This piece lived inside her. Her fingers remembered where to land, how much pressure to apply, when to linger on a note and when to let it breathe. She forgot about Hal's 10-minute deadline, forgot about Mr. Vescovi watching from his table, forgot about the risk she was taking. There was only the music pouring from her fingers after being dammed up for so long. As the final delicate notes of Clair de Lune faded, Lily became aware of a strange sound. Nothing. The restaurant had grown remarkably quiet. She looked up, startled to find dozens of pairs of eyes fixed on her. Her cheeks flushed with heat. Had she played that badly? Was everyone staring in horror? Then a man at table 9 began to applaud. The couple by the window joined in. Within seconds, the entire dining room was filled with applause. Lily caught glimpses of surprised faces, delighted smiles, raised eyebrows. At the bar, Zoe stood with her mouth slightly open. Near the kitchen, Teresa had stopped mid-stride, a plate of pasta suspended in her hands. And at his table, Mr. Vescovi was nodding with approval. Leaning over to say something to his guests, who were also applauding, Hal appeared at Lily's side, his face a mixture of shock and relief. Don't stop, he whispered urgently. Keep playing, so she did. She moved from Debussy to a Chopin nocturne, her confidence growing with each measure. The conversations around the restaurant gradually resumed, but now they had a different quality. More relaxed, more appreciative. The music wasn't background noise anymore. It was enhancing everything just as it was supposed to. Between pieces, servers approached the piano to whisper requests from guests. Table 15 loves Beethoven. The couple celebrating their anniversary asked for something romantic. Lily nodded and played on, drawing from a mental library she hadn't accessed in years. During a brief pause, Zoe appeared with a glass of water, placing it discreetly on top of the piano. Where did you learn to play like that? She whispered, wide-eyed. Lily took a quick sip. Long story, but you're a waitress, Zoe persisted, as if Lily might have forgotten this fact. Yes, Lily agreed, her fingers already finding the opening notes of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata for Table 15. I am. As the evening progressed, Lily lost track of time. Her body remembered the familiar ache of playing for hours, the slight tension in her shoulders, the focused energy in her forearms. But it was a good ache, like stretching muscles that had been still for too long. She played through dinner service, through dessert, through coffee. She played as early diners left and new ones arrived. As the sky outside the windows darkened from dusk to night, she played jazz standards and classical pieces, movie themes and gentle arrangements of popular songs. At one point, she glanced up to see Mr. Vescovi standing nearby, watching her with an unreadable expression. She almost faltered, but then he gave her a small nod, the kind of acknowledgement he rarely offered to anyone, and returned to his guests. By 9:30, Lily's fingers were beginning to tire, but she pressed on. The restaurant was still full, unusually so for a Tuesday night. She noticed people at the bar who seemed in no hurry to leave, nursing drinks and listening. A few tables had been occupied by the same guests for hours. At 10 o'clock, when the piano music usually ended, Hal approached again. Can you play for another half hour? He asked quietly. We're still packed. Lily nodded and transitioned into a gentle Brahms intermezzo. Her back ached and her fingers were growing stiff, but something inside her was more alive than it had been in years. Each note felt like reclaiming a piece of herself she'd set aside for too long. Finally, at 10:30, she played a last piece, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, her fingers dancing across the keys one final time. As the last notes faded into silence, the restaurant erupted into applause again, more enthusiastic than before. Several people stood. Someone whistled. Lily stood from the bench feeling slightly dizzy and gave an awkward bow before hurrying away from the sudden attention. In the kitchen, she leaned against a wall, catching her breath. Her hands were trembling again, but not from nervousness this time. Playing for nearly 4 hours after years of not touching a piano had pushed her to her limit. That, said Miguel, the chef, pointing a wooden spoon at her, was something else. Where have you been hiding those magic hands all this time, huh? Before she could answer, Hal burst through the door. Lily, Mr. Vescovi wants to speak with you now. Her stomach dropped. Despite the applause, despite the apparent success of the evening, she suddenly felt certain she was about to be fired. Stepping in as pianist hadn't been her job. She had abandoned her tables, left others to cover for her. Mr. Vescovi was known for being strict about employees staying in their assigned roles. Coming, she said, smoothing her apron with hands that still hummed with music. She followed Hal back into the dining room. Most of the guests had left now, but a few lingered, watching her with curious expressions as she passed. Mr. Vescovi was waiting by the piano, his visitors gone. His face was serious, unsmiling. Lily took a deep breath and stepped forward to face whatever came next. Mr. Vescovi stood by the piano, one hand resting on its polished surface as if checking for dust. In his crisp suit and with his silver hair perfectly combed, he looked like he belonged in a magazine about successful businessmen. Lily had never spoken directly to him before. Their paths rarely crossed. He visited the restaurant only occasionally, and when he did, he spoke to Hal or the head chef. Not to waitstaff, sir, Hal began. This is Lily. I know who she is, Mr. Vescovi said, his voice carrying the slight accent of someone who had learned English later in life. He studied Lily with eyes that missed nothing. You've worked here for 3 years. It wasn't a question, but Lily nodded anyway. Yes, sir. And in those 3 years, you never mentioned that you could play like that. Lily swallowed hard. No, sir. Why not? The question caught her off guard. She had expected accusations, perhaps even anger for stepping out of her role, but not curiosity. It never came up. One of Mr. Vescovi's eyebrows rose slightly. It never came up? You work in a restaurant with a piano at its center, and it never occurred to you to mention that you're a concert-level pianist. I'm not. Lily started to protest, then stopped herself. I didn't think it was relevant to serving tables, sir. Mr. Vescovi exchanged a look with Hal that Lily couldn't interpret. My investors were very impressed tonight, he said, turning back to her. One of them is on the board of the symphony. He asked for your name. Lily felt heat rising to her face. I'm sorry if I overstepped. Overstepped? Mr. Vescovi actually smiled, though it was brief. Ms. Lily, you saved us tonight. More than that, you created something special. I've owned this restaurant for 15 years. I've heard many pianists play that instrument. Few have done it the way you did. Hal was nodding enthusiastically beside him. We had 3 tables ask if you play every Tuesday. People were taking videos, posting on social media. We're already getting calls asking about tomorrow's music. Lily blinked, trying to process what they were saying. This wasn't at all what she had expected. Which brings me to why I wanted to speak with you. Mr. Vescovi continued. Anthony will be back on Thursday, but Wednesday is still open. And while Anthony is excellent, I wonder. He paused, looking at her with newfound interest. Would you consider playing again? Perhaps 2 or 3 nights a week? But my job? Lily glanced at Hal, confused. We'd adjust your schedule, of course, Hal jumped in. You'd play instead of serving on those nights. Same pay rate to start, but if it increases business like I think it will. He glanced at Mr. Vescovi, who nodded slightly. We can discuss compensation details later, Mr. Vescovi said. For now, I'd just like to know if you're interested. Was she interested? Lily's mind raced. Playing tonight had awakened something she'd thought was gone forever. The joy of it, the connection to the music, the way it made her feel alive in a way serving tables never had, but it had also dragged up memories she'd spent years trying to forget. Can I think about it? She asked finally. If Mr. Vescovi was disappointed by her lack of immediate enthusiasm, he didn't show it. Of course. Let Hal know by tomorrow afternoon. He extended his hand and Lily shook it, surprised by the firmness of his grip. Thank you for tonight, Miss Lily. It was, unexpected. After he left, Hal turned to her with a grin that threatened to split his face. Are you kidding me? What's there to think about? This is huge. Lily managed a small smile. I just need a little time. Hal looked like he wanted to say more, but something in her expression stopped him. Okay. But seriously, Lily, you were amazing tonight. Whatever you decide, thank you. The restaurant was nearly empty now. The last few customers were paying their bills, servers were cleaning tables, and the kitchen staff was finishing the nightly cleanup. Lily went to the break room to gather her things, feeling strangely disconnected from her surroundings. Zoe was there, changing out of her uniform. There she is, she exclaimed when Lily walked in. The secret piano genius. Why didn't you ever tell us? We've been working together for 2 years? And you never once mentioned you could play like that. Lily shrugged, opening her locker. It never came up. It never came up, Zoe repeated, rolling her eyes. That's like saying, oh, I forgot to mention I climbed Mount Everest last summer. Seriously, where did you learn to play like that? Lily pulled her coat from the locker, suddenly eager to leave, to be alone with her thoughts. It's a long story, Zoe. Maybe another time. She could feel Zoe's curious gaze following her as she left the break room, but thankfully, her coworker didn't push further. Outside, the night air was cool against Lily's face. She took a deep breath, letting it clear her head. The walk to her apartment was 15 minutes, just enough time to replay the evening's events in her mind. The feeling of the keys beneath her fingers after so long. The surprised faces of the diners. Mr. Vescovi's unexpected offer. Her apartment was small. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a living area just big enough for a couch and a bookshelf. But the rent was reasonable, and it was clean, and it was hers. Lily hung up her coat and kicked off her shoes, then stood in the center of the room, suddenly unsure what to do with herself. She felt wired, too full of energy to sleep. Her eyes landed on the closet door. Behind it, pushed to the very back, was a cardboard box she hadn't opened in years. Before she could change her mind, Lily went to the closet and dragged the box out into the living room. The tape had yellowed with age, but it still held. Lily found a pair of scissors and carefully cut it open. Inside were stacks of sheet music, old programs from recitals and concerts, newspaper clippings, and photographs. On top was a frame wrapped in bubble wrap. Lily unwrapped it slowly, revealing a photograph of a much younger version of herself standing next to an elderly man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Both were standing in front of a piano and both were beaming at the camera. "Oh, Mr. Chen," Lily whispered, running a finger over the glass. "What would you say if you could see me now?" Mr. Chen had been her piano teacher from the time she was 6 years old until everything changed. He had recognized something in the quiet little girl with clumsy fingers that even she hadn't known was there. Patience, he'd called it, an ear for the music behind the notes. For 12 years she had gone to his home studio 3 times a week. For 12 years she had practiced daily, had competed in recitals, had dreamed of concert halls and music schools. Piano wasn't just something she did, it was who she was until the accident. Until the phone call on a rainy Tuesday night, the police officer's solemn voice telling her that Mr. Chen's car had been hit by a drunk driver. Until the funeral where she'd played Chopin's funeral march with tears blurring the keys. The last time she'd touched a piano until tonight, she had been 18 then, with a scholarship to a prestigious music school and dreams as big as the sky. But after Mr. Chen died, something inside her had broken. The music that had once been her solace became a source of pain, each note a reminder of what she'd lost. She had declined the scholarship, packed away her music, and tried to become someone else. Someone who didn't feel the loss so keenly. For almost 10 years, she had mostly succeeded. She'd worked various jobs, landed at Emilio's, built a quiet life for herself. She had friends, she had her apartment, she had routines that kept her days predictable and safe. If sometimes she heard a piece of music that made her hands itch for piano keys, well, she had gotten good at ignoring that feeling, until tonight. Until she'd seen the restaurant struggling without its pianist, until she'd heard that sad recorded music playing while Mr. Vescovi tried to impress his important guests. Until something inside her had finally said, "Enough." Lily set the photograph on her coffee table and continued looking through the box. Programs from her student recitals, certificates from competitions, sheet music with Mr. Chen's neat handwriting in the margins. More feeling here? Listen to the space between the notes. Don't rush, let it breathe. Her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Hal. "Just got another call asking if you're playing tomorrow night. No pressure, but please say yes?" Lily put the phone down without answering and pulled out more items from the box. Near the bottom, she found a USB drive labeled Lily's Audition, Juilliard. She stared at it, remembering the day Mr. Chen had recorded her playing for her application. He had been so proud, so certain she would be accepted. And she had been, along with the scholarship that would have made it possible. She set the USB drive aside and reached the bottom of the box. There, carefully wrapped in soft cloth, was a metronome. Mr. Chen's metronome, which his wife had given to Lily after the funeral. "He would want you to have this," she had said, "to keep time with your music." But there had been no more music. Not until tonight. Lily picked up the metronome, feeling its familiar weight in her hands. She wound it carefully and set it on the coffee table, then released the arm. Tick, tick, tick. The steady rhythm filled her small apartment, constant and unwavering, like a heartbeat. She closed her eyes and listened, her fingers moving slightly in her lap, playing an invisible piano to the metronome's steady count. For the first time in nearly a decade, the memory of Mr. Chen didn't bring only pain. There was something else there too. Gratitude, pride, a sense of connection that had been missing from her life for too long. Lily opened her eyes and picked up her phone. She typed a quick message to Hal. "What time should I be at the piano tomorrow?" Word traveled fast. By the time Lily arrived at Emilio's the next evening, there was already a small crowd waiting outside. She paused across the street, watching as Hal spoke with the people gathered near the entrance. He gestured animatedly, and though she couldn't hear what he was saying, she could guess. He was telling them about the waitress who had surprised everyone with her piano playing, promising them another magical evening. Lily's stomach tightened. What had seemed right in the quiet of her apartment last night now felt terrifying in the fading light of day. These people had expectations. They had come specifically to hear her play. What if last night had been a fluke? What if her fingers wouldn't cooperate today? What if they all left disappointed? She clutched her bag closer to her side. Inside was a folder with sheet music she had dug out of the box last night, pieces she had once known by heart but now wasn't so sure about. She had stayed up late, fingers dancing over her kitchen counter as if it were a keyboard, trying to remember passages that had once been as familiar as her own name. "You came." Zoe's voice startled her out of her thoughts. Her coworker was crossing the street toward her, grinning widely. "I wasn't sure you would." "I said I would," Lily replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Yeah, but—" Zoe shrugged, falling into step beside her as they approached the restaurant. "It's different, you know, going from being the person who brings people their food to being the person they come to see. It's a big deal." It was a big deal. Too big, maybe. Lily felt her steps slowing as they neared the entrance where the small crowd was now being led inside. Zoe seemed to sense her hesitation. "Hey," she said, touching Lily's arm lightly. "You've got this. You were amazing last night and you'll be amazing tonight. And if you're not—" She grinned mischievously. "Well, they all already ordered drinks, so it's too late for them to leave." Despite her nerves, Lily found herself smiling. "Thanks, I think." Inside, the restaurant hummed with energy. It was busier than usual for a Wednesday, with nearly every table filled or reserved. Hal spotted Lily immediately and hurried over, relief washing over his face. "There you are. We're already turning people away. Can you believe it? On a Wednesday." He lowered his voice. "Mr. Vescovi called twice to make sure you were coming. He's bringing some important people again tonight." "Great. More pressure." Lily nodded, trying to keep her expression neutral. "I'll go get ready." "You're on in 15 minutes, Hal said, already moving away to deal with another customer. "Oh, and we put a tip jar on the piano. Hope that's okay." Lily made her way to the break room, nodding to Miguel, who gave her a thumbs up from the kitchen doorway. Everyone seemed to be looking at her differently now, as if she had suddenly transformed into someone else overnight. In a way, she supposed she had. The break room was empty, giving her a moment of quiet to collect herself. She hung up her coat, put her bag in her locker, and took out the folder of music. Then she went to the small bathroom, splashed cold water on her face, and looked at herself in the mirror. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection. "It's just playing the piano. You've done it before, but that wasn't entirely true. She had played before, yes, but not like this, not as the main attraction, not with people coming specifically to hear her. In all her years of lessons and recitals, she had always been the student, the one learning, the one with Mr. Chen standing nearby, ready to guide and support her. Now she was on her own, or was she? Lily closed her eyes and remembered the photograph she had found last night. The one of her and Mr. Chen. She remembered his voice, gentle but firm. "The music is already there, Lily. In the piano, in the air, in you. Your job is just to let it out." She took a deep breath and opened her eyes. "Okay, Mr. Chen," she whispered. "Let's let it out." When she walked into the dining room, conversations paused momentarily as people noticed her. She kept her gaze forward, focusing on the piano that waited for her at the center of the room. Someone had polished it until it gleamed under the soft lighting. The brass sign was gone. Instead, there was a small card on the piano lid that read, "Tonight's pianist, Lily Chen." Lily almost stumbled when she saw it. Chen wasn't her last name, it was Wang. But seeing Mr. Chen's name beside hers felt right somehow, as if he was there with her. She wondered if Hal had made a mistake or if it was some strange coincidence. Either way, it steadied her as she took her seat at the bench. The restaurant wasn't completely quiet as she began to play. It never was, with the sounds of dining and kitchen work creating a background hum. But there was an attentiveness in the air that hadn't been there last night. People were listening, really listening. She started with Beethoven's Für Elise, a piece familiar enough to put both her and the audience at ease. Her fingers found the keys with growing confidence, muscle memory awakening more fully than it had the night before. As she played, she found herself remembering more pieces, melodies and harmonies rising to the surface of her mind like long submerged treasures finally returning to light. From Beethoven, she moved to Mozart, then to a Chopin waltz that had always been one of her favorites. The music flowed through her, around her, each piece leading naturally to the next. She didn't need to look at the sheet music she had brought. Her hands remembered, her heart remembered. Halfway through the evening, during a brief pause between pieces, Lily became aware of phones being held up around the room. People were recording her. The realization almost made her falter as she began Debussy's Reverie, but she pushed through the momentary panic. Let them record. Let them share. The music wasn't just for her anymore. It never had been, really. Mr. Chen had always told her that music was meant to be given away. As the night progressed, Lily felt something shifting inside her. The fear was still there, but it was being crowded out by something else. Joy, yes, but also a sense of rightness, of coming home to herself after a long absence. This was who she was. This was what she was meant to do. When she finally took a short break, Zoe appeared at her side with a glass of water and a look of awe. "They love you," she whispered, nodding toward the dining room where people were talking animatedly, many glancing toward the piano. "And check this out." She pointed to the tip jar, which was filled with bills. "That can't be right," Lily said, surprised. There had to be over $100 there. "Oh, it's right," Zoe grinned. "And the night's not over yet. Also, have you seen social media? You're trending locally. Someone posted a video from last night that's got thousands of views already." Lily nearly choked on her water. "What?" Zoe pulled out her phone and showed her a video titled, "Waitress Takes Her Turn at the Piano. Nobody expected what happened next." The thumbnail showed Lily at the piano. Her face in profile, hands blurred over the keys. "I haven't had time to watch it yet," Zoe said. "But people are going crazy in the comments. Look." Lily scrolled through some of the comments, her eyes widening. "Who is she? She's incredible. I need a full concert from this woman. That Chopin Nocturne made me cry. Literally sitting in my car crying. Does she have an album? I would buy it right now." There were hundreds more, all saying variations of the same thing. People were moved by her playing. People wanted more. "Ms. Lily." A familiar voice drew her attention away from the phone. Mr. Vescovi stood nearby, accompanied by a tall woman in an elegant gray suit. "May I introduce Professor Rivera from the Westlake Conservatory of Music? She was quite interested to hear you play tonight." Lily stood quickly, nearly knocking over her water glass. "Professor?" She nodded, suddenly very aware of her waitress uniform and sensible shoes. Professor Rivera extended her hand. "That was extraordinary playing, Ms. Wong. Mr. Vescovi tells me you've had no formal training in some time?" I studied with a private teacher until I was 18, Lily managed, shaking the professor's hand. "Mr. Chen, he was very good." "He must have been," Professor Rivera said, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Your technique shows some rough edges, but your musicality, your interpretation, those can't be taught. Those come from within." She reached into her jacket and pulled out a business card. "The conservatory is always looking for talented instructors for our community programs. No degree required. Just a gift for music and a willingness to share it. Perhaps you'd be interested in discussing this further?" Lily took the card automatically, her mind struggling to catch up with what was happening. Thank you. I'll think about it." "Please do," Professor Rivera said. "Talent like yours shouldn't be hidden away in a restaurant. Though I must say this is a lovely venue." She nodded to Mr. Vescovi, who looked pleased. After they walked away, Lily stood frozen, staring at the business card in her hand. Professor at a music conservatory, offering her a job. Teaching music. It was too much to process. "Better get back to the piano," Hal said, appearing at her elbow. "Your fans are getting restless." Her fans? The phrase felt strange, almost laughable. 24 hours ago, she had been just another waitress. Now she was a pianist with fans, with a video going viral, with a potential job offer from a music conservatory. As she returned to the piano bench, Lily felt a moment of vertigo, as if she had stepped into someone else's life. But then her fingers touched the keys and the feeling passed. This was her life. It always had been. She had just taken a long detour. She began to play again, a piece she hadn't planned on. Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, one of the most challenging works in her repertoire. It had been Mr. Chen's favorite, the piece he had insisted she master for her Juilliard audition. As her fingers flew over the keys, navigating the complex passages with growing confidence, she felt his presence more strongly than ever. The music is already there. "Lily, your job is just to let it out." And finally, after 10 long years, she was. 3 months later, Lily's fingers danced across the keys of a baby grand piano in the small recital hall of the Westlake Conservatory. Afternoon sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting golden rectangles on the polished wooden floor. 12. Pairs of eyes watched her intently. Her students, ranging in age from 7 to 70, gathered for their monthly group class. That's how Chopin intended it to be played, she explained, finishing the demonstration. Notice how the melody flows over the accompaniment? Like water over stones in a stream. Now who wants to try? A hesitant hand went up. Mrs. Rodriguez, a retired nurse who had always wanted to learn piano but never had the time until now. Lily smiled encouragingly and stood from the bench, making room for her oldest student. Remember, it's not about hitting all the right notes, Lily said gently as Mrs. Rodriguez positioned her hands. It's about telling the story behind the music. As her student began to play, Lily moved to the side of the room, watching with pride. 6 months ago, Mrs. Rodriguez couldn't read music. Now she was tackling Chopin, with all his complex emotions and technical challenges. Not perfectly, of course. Her tempo wavered and she missed a few notes, but with heart. With feeling. With an understanding of what the music was trying to say. That was what Lily tried to teach above all else. Technique could be practiced, notes could be memorized, but the soul of music, that had to be felt. It was what Mr. Chen had taught her all those years ago, and what she now passed on to her own students. The door at the back of the recital hall opened quietly, and Professor Rivera slipped in, giving Lily a small nod. She came to observe occasionally, always offering constructive feedback afterward. At first, Lily had found these visits nerve-wracking, but now she welcomed them. The professor had become something of a mentor to her, helping her navigate her new role at the conservatory. After Mrs. Rodriguez finished playing, the class applauded warmly. Lily led a brief discussion about the piece, inviting other students to share what they heard and felt. Then she assigned new practice pieces for the coming month and dismissed the class. "You're a natural teacher," Professor Rivera said, approaching as the students gathered their things and filtered out of the room. "That connection you make with each of them, you can't teach that." Lily smiled, gathering her sheet music. "I had a good example to follow." "You're Mr. Chen?" the professor asked. Lily nodded. She had shared more about her former teacher over the past months, even showing Professor Rivera some old videos of her lessons with him. He always said that teaching was a sacred trust, that each student gives you a piece of their heart when they sit down at the piano, and it's your job to help it sing. "Wise man," Professor Rivera said. "Speaking of which, have you thought any more about the advanced certificate program? With your performance experience growing, it would be the perfect next step if you want to expand your teaching credentials." Lily had thought about it. A lot. The program would mean more formal education, more structure to complement the practical experience she'd gained. But it would also mean more time away from performing. "Still thinking," she said. "No rush," Professor Rivera assured her. "You've already accomplished so much in such a short time. I can hardly believe it's been only 3 months since you came to us. 3 months that had changed everything. 3 months since the night a waitress had sat down at a restaurant piano and let her true self emerge after years of hiding. 3 months of growth, of rediscovery, of building a new life note by note." Lily gathered her belongings and headed for the exit. "I should get going. It's Wednesday." Professor Rivera smiled knowingly. "Emilio's night. Give my regards to Mr. Vescovi." Outside, the autumn air was crisp and cool, leaves crunching beneath Lily's feet as she walked to her car. She drove with the windows down, letting the breeze clear her mind in preparation for the evening ahead. She still played at Emilio's 3 nights a week, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday. She could have played more if she wanted. Hal had practically begged her to, but with her teaching schedule at the conservatory 5 mornings a week and private lessons 3 afternoons, plus her own practice time, 3 nights was all she could manage. The arrangement worked well for everyone. Anthony continued to play the other nights, and the 2 pianists had developed a friendly rivalry, each trying to outdo the other with their repertoire and technique. The restaurant had never been busier, with reservations now required weeks in advance for tables near the piano. When Lily arrived at Emilio's that evening, she entered through the front door, no longer going through the staff entrance at the back. She wasn't a waitress anymore, though she still chatted with her former co-workers between sets, sometimes helping to deliver drinks or clear tables during busy moments. Old habits died hard, there she is. Zoe called from behind the bar where she was mixing cocktails. The maestro herself. Lily rolled her eyes at the nickname but smiled. How's the crowd tonight? Packed as usual, Zoe replied. And guess what? That guy from the record company is back. Third time this month. Lily's stomach did a little flip. She knew who Zoe meant. A well-dressed man in his 40s who always sat at table 7 and always left a generous tip in the jar. He had introduced himself after her performance 2 weeks ago, handing her a business card with a prestigious label's logo embossed on it. Just something to think about, he had said. No pressure, no pressure. That seemed to be what everyone said these days, even as opportunities piled up around her like autumn leaves. The teaching position, the certificate program, the music agent who wanted to book her for private events, the recording offer, the local symphony that had invited her to audition. No pressure, they all said, just something to think about. And Lily did think about it all. Constantly. Sometimes it kept her awake at night, this abundance of choices after so many years of having none. Or rather, after so many years of choosing to have none. You don't have to decide everything at once, Mr. Chen's widow had told her over tea last Sunday. Lily had started visiting the elderly woman regularly, bringing her groceries and playing for her on the upright piano that still sat in the corner of her living room. The music will guide you where you need to go. Lily hoped that was true, because while her head spun with all the possibilities, her heart was simply happy to be playing again, to be herself again. She made her way to the piano, nodding to familiar faces in the crowd. The restaurant hummed with conversation and the clink of silverware against china. Hal gave her a thumbs up from his spot near the hostess stand. Mr. Vescovi, who now came every Wednesday without fail, raised his wine glass in a small salute from his usual table. As Lily took her seat at the bench, a hush fell over the dining room. It happened every time now. This moment of anticipation, of collective breath-holding before she began to play. It still amazed her, this power of music to unite a room full of strangers. She adjusted the bench, placed her hands on the keys, and began. Debussy's Clair de Lune, the same piece she had played that first night 3 months ago. But she played it differently now. More confidently, more openly, with all the joy and pain and hope that had filled her life since then. As the final notes faded, there was that brief, magical moment of silence before the applause began. Lily smiled, nodding her thanks to the audience before transitioning smoothly into her next piece. This was the part she loved most, the flow of one song into another, the musical conversation she created throughout the evening, the connection with listeners who came to be moved, to feel something beyond the ordinary. Between pieces, she caught sight of a new face in the crowd, a young woman, perhaps 16 or 17, watching the piano with undisguised longing. Lily recognized that look. It was the same one she had worn as a child, seeing a piano up close for the first time. The look that said, I want to do that. I need to do that. During her break, Lily wasn't surprised when the young woman approached her. Excuse me, she said shyly. Your playing is amazing. I've been taking lessons for a few years, but my teacher moved away, and my parents can't afford the fancy teachers at the conservatory. And she trailed off, clearly embarrassed by her own rambling. Lily smiled. Do you love it? The piano? The girl nodded emphatically. More than anything. Then don't give up, Lily said. She reached into her bag and pulled out one of her new business cards, simple white with black musical notes along the edge. She wrote something on the back before handing it to the girl. Call this number. We can work something out. The girl's eyes widened as she read what Lily had written. First 6 lessons free. She looked up, her face glowing with hope. Really? Really, Lily confirmed. Someone did the same for me once. It's only fair to pass it on. After the girl left, clutching the card like a precious gem, Lily returned to the piano for her final set of the evening. As her fingers found the opening notes of Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, Mr. Chen's favorite, she felt a sense of rightness wash over her. The journey from that first night at the piano to now hadn't been simple or straightforward. There had been doubts and fears, late-night questioning, moments of wondering if she was making the right choices. There would be more such moments ahead, she was sure. More decisions to make, more paths to choose between. But one thing was certain. The music that had been locked away inside her for so long was free now, flowing out into the world again. And whether she played in this restaurant, in concert halls and recording studios, or simply in her own living room, that music would remain a part of her. The waitress had taken her turn at the piano, and though no one had expected what happened next, least of all Lily herself, the melody that had begun that night would continue, note by note, day by day, evolving into a symphony, all her own.